Hello everyone, welcome to another episode. My attention finds this moment in a very interesting way. Pretty much, I wrote down a couple sentences of different ideas, and then I thought about how can I share all of them, and then the idea of the divine potential of the species arose. And I'd even written here the divine potential of a conscious species. I was just checking the volume. I'm going to bring down the background noise a bit. Okay, there we go. Okay, so the divine potential of a conscious species. And in the subtitle, I've written invisible subjects and visible objects. So let me see how I could share with the viewers. Pretty much I could say this, that a hobby of mine, an existential hobby of mine, has been to wonder what, it's as if, okay, here I'll say it, it's as if I am someone who opened his eyes to existence, and in some sense it's like, what is the meaning of this existence? What is the meaning of this being here? So pretty much I have made, in my mind, have had a consideration that our species doesn't know what's actually going on, and it's become a sort of side life research project for me. I noticed in a sort of contrast between other species and our own that the human being has a responsibility to its invisible life, its mind and memories and visions, as much as it has a responsibility for just existential continuity. It's like a species is here, and I'm pretty much like, okay, what's going to happen to it? If life could be fast-forwarded like a film, what sort of events will the species go through? And I find the advantage of our species being conscious of itself, of the world, and being so conscious of it that we named it. You know, people don't realize, but the fact that a human being can speak, it's like other animals, if they could talk, they'd be like, no way, what are you guys doing? They'd be freaking out right now. We are like the aliens of this planet, of planetary intelligence, you know. You know, it's like a squirrel looks at a human being and it's like, what is this superior entity doing and you know, in my garden? So, just like fast forwarding a film, you know, I guess I am someone who has had such an ego, such an arrogance, that I have, to some degree, to my own psyche, I've seen the destiny of like my individual life to some degree. And now the question of the destiny of the collective life remains. You see, more fascinating than what a human being did in its lifetime is what a species did before extinction. To me, there is a poetry to that and a purity to that no sin or memories, sin, memory, or genetics could in some sense like, I don't know how to tell you what it's like. To me, there's a fascination that I have realized this fascination is beyond the eyes of this species. You see, it's interesting to wonder about how an individual intelligence moves, but it's also very fascinating to not just see one bird flying in the sky, but many. And to now realize that galaxies are like birds flying somewhere poetically. The incredible thing about the human mind is that it is an access to a dualistic dimension. It's as if, like, on some level, there's nothing good or evil about the concept of good or evil. Man has accepted the simultaneity of the nature of his mind overlaid upon physical reality. You know what it is? It's like we're an unknown multidimensional event. And as this unknown multidimensional event, we are starting off like strategies to knowing ourselves. And really, that strategy is being conscious of duality. It's like, from a philosophical perspective, I was like, man, what's the purpose of this life? To constantly jump through the hoops of chaos and order? To constantly stay balanced as if it's life a tightrope, that it's like, we have to make sure not a single slip. But on some level, I have realized that there is an intelligence here present the same time the human ego is present. And it's an intelligence, it's literally like an invisible power is watching a visible power. And the invisible power is wondering, when will the visible power ask itself where the visible comes from? You see, just like how human beings are born, ideas are also born. And they can also die in accordance to how many human beings keep them in their attention. For me, I looked at the past and I saw an effort of the species there where I was like, regardless of the past's mistake, they must be held in the honor sector of our minds. That means we must honor how our ancestors got here. This is very important. And to not consider our ancestors being just one lineage of a human being, because it's impossible to be just a human being in a world. When a world is happening the same time a human being is happening, there will be moments where the human psyche will wonder about what is identifying with what. It's another way of saying it's a self wondering, am I the world first? And it's a world wondering, was there a self first? To me, all of, let's say, the contrast between theism and atheism comes down to this. One is saying there was a self first, and the other is saying the world came first. If the world came first, ourselves are meaningless, technically. For me, I found it very fascinating that when I was young, there was this TV channel called Animal Planet, and I remember I would watch a lot of like animal life in there, and I would see, like, it would show like a photographer who's been waiting to capture, like, film, like, waiting for like a mountain lion to step out of a cave, right? Like that kind of wonder and excitement to see something rare present itself in the world. And it's as if it's like, instead of being fascinated by something outside of me, I realize, oh my God, there is an unknown wilderness to how intelligence comes about, that our memories do not do justice. If we have meaning for an infinitely changing system, it's as if it's like there's something, the world is not just a giant photograph, it's a giant film. And so there's this existential film playing, which right now, like my voice and, even though we don't see sound, but we acknowledge it the same way, a sight is concluded. For me, there's something existentially moving. When I ask myself, okay, what grand purpose can emptiness have? Because that's how it started. Before we were who we were to ask the questions, we were not the question. It's as if like in life sometimes a person can see the hollowness to a setting, and when there's a dishonesty, the world gets pulled inside, gets trapped by simulations. When there's an honest nature to the advancement of a species on a rock in the middle of nowhere, there's no longer possession. You see, it's like the way a civilization advances is by wondering what would the most advanced state look like, and what would be the most advanced consequence of, let's say, the most advanced civilization. The ideal would be that human beings would be so advanced that there are minor or major dualistic problems do not conflict. It's another way of saying an advanced being no longer plays the games of power. Why? Because it is beyond it. Because it's more advanced than the ego's, let's say, ego's hands, getting its desire. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, there's a way. It's like on some pure level, we are moments of. It's like consciousness is capturing a living universe, and it's as if we have a sort of amnesia to how universally we are present prior to any personality, name, or storyline defines us. The species right now it's kind of a bit, like, I'll be honest, like, people, I'll release the world, to allow to judge me on this, but I'll say this, that to me right now, the species, as much as it has an emotional understanding of what its true value is, it's like a language worshiping game. It's like, imagine waking up in a video game where all the quests of the video game is in language. Like, everything is language. Language is the skeletal structure to ideology. And what language is conception. And what conception is pretty much, we can say, the purpose of words is to paint a film. That means people don't speak so specific words are heard. People speak because in the inner realms there is a vision, and then that vision is journeying out into the outer realms. Anyways, pretty much for this episode, I have a list and I'm going to talk about these ideas. So the next thing I've written here, the first idea is the divine potential of a conscious species. Pretty much, I'm saying there's something here. There's 4.5 billion years of evolution has led to something. And it's as if the current world we find ourselves is the first prototype of like an ancient world. Do you know? It's like this is the best that our ancestors could do, the world we find ourselves in now. But the world that the future generations will find themselves in is the best that we can do. You see, on some level, what is more important than the ideological relationship of a human being with the world is, on some level, how does a human being, as a moment of energy in the realm, activate its energy in a way where it's as if just the same time we have an individual victory, we have a collective victory. Do you see? Like, to me, there was this idea spoken about in Sun Tzu's The Art of War, where he's pretty much saying, like, two generals and their armies are like at war. The general that is aligned with the heavens, poetically. That's as if the general who is not ignoring the flow of, like, the karma of the moment of the battlefield, right? It's as if, like, on some level, if two generals were fighting, the general that had understood the battlefield better than the other general had an advantage. Do you know? And so it was, in some sense, a sort of alignment with a universal flow. I don't know how to say it. I want our species to wonder about its greatest and most advanced potential and attempt it while it can. To me, like, if anybody was like Mr.Within, you know, what's your idea behind all your ideas? I would say to build an advanced civilization during my lifetime, to attempt it, right? To start it, right? It's as if civilization has so easily accepted its inefficiency that it has numbed itself from even wanting to wonder about its efficiency. People are more convinced by the memories of their past than the potentials of their future, right? And nothing advanced can happen if the context of advancement is not being acknowledged, right? The idea of advancement, or poetically the spirit of advancement, goes beyond duality. Do you know? It's pretty much like consciousness. How would I say this? Let me see. Let me tell you what it is. It's like the metaphor right now, I'm writing it down. The metaphor is pretty much, imagine we have an unknown experiencer, just like somebody who would play a video game seated in, let's say, at a desk in front of a computer screen. Okay, so imagine the person who's turned on the computer to play the video game is we define that as the unknown experiencer. Now imagine the screen of the computer video game being consciousness, and imagine the mind being the computer, do you know? And inside the computer, inside the experience of our minds, right, there is a pixelated character on the screen of consciousness for the unknown experiencer. And that pixelated character is an existential character. It's as if on some level, the metaphor I'm trying to convey here is that existence is the pixels, you know, of a video game where we are inside the mind. Do you know? A very deep mystery is like, are we alive or are we inside life? Inside a dimension that is alive? How far do the mysteries of an attention that is retaliating against the void, like, how far does that go? When I say the divine potential of the species, I am saying, like, imagine right now the species is just like trapped in a duality. You know, everything's being, there's a sort of judgment going on. It's like we're on a rock in the middle of nowhere, and there's like the concept of judgment. And the concept of judgment is important as a discriminatory survival factor. It's like, as I said earlier, there's nothing, you know, good and evil about good and evil. That means it's as if like some things are just like right now, if I'm saying I'm a multidimensional being, the way I'm categorizing those dimensions is that there's an existential level to this game, to this game of life, and then overlaid, or like when existence wonders about how it's existing, suddenly the nature of the mind is revealed. When the nature of the mind is revealed, if somebody says, hey, Mr. Within, can you look at the mind? And I would say this is the challenge, because the mind, as much as we give it a category or reshape it or define it, is being, it's literally like, we are trying to use sight to figure out who's looking. But that looking is the pure screen of consciousness where it's an unknown viewer. So right now, what is, like I'm that person in history saying, what is behind our eyes is unknown. And this whole time we have been allowing reality to filter what we are, but it's unknown. It's like the moment you find an unknown variable, the certainty of the past goes away. So it's like, what is the divine potential of a pixelated character inside a mental computer? The idea is that how the character moves on the screen. So literally, it's like mysticism is like a video game character trying to figure out how poetically the divine God or gods are like in some sense playing through the human interface, right? It's another way of saying a video game character became so self-conscious that it realized there was an additional dimension that was, causing there to be movement. The sky can even talk to us when we realize our mind is alive. It's another way of saying, like, meaning is arising. So, anyways, to carry on somehow. The divine potential of a conscious species. Consciousness is a rare opportunity. It's an advantage. It took us 4.5 billion years to just be able to notice our suffering. So it's the noticing part that is how our consciousness is happening and being. That is the very fascinating part of life. It's one of the most fascinating things a person can discover. Like if a person thought like the pyramids of Giza were a wonder of the world, it's like consciousness is also the most important wonder of the world. To me, reality is on some level a very strange system, because everything can exist and everything at the same time can be conditionally experienced. Right? It's as if I'm saying, hey universe, why are you so big, and why is our consciousness so small? Right? And then I realize it is only in the definition of the human being which we are ideologically bound. It's another way I'm saying that when you're looking in front of your eyes, yes, you're a body. But if you close your eyes and wonder who's looking at those inner images, you're going to realize that the mind doesn't have a body, because the mind is the presence of a dimension of its own nature. Right? And it's this idea where at first the person doesn't even notice their mind, which is incredible witness to the other dimensions that are here. It's like one of the most important things even prior to meditation is kind of like a person has to wonder about what honor could be. And what is the most honorable act for the future generations? To me, it's literally our most advanced. It's like the best thing we could do. Give the future generations a potential for them to do the best thing they can. right? It's incredible. They say there's a butterfly effect, and I see how in some sense it's not just human beings that are just walking to the end of time. It is like every idea and every experience in the vicinity of their mind. It's like, to me, an advanced being would have an advanced approach to life, and an advanced approach to life would be first acknowledging how it's an unknown real event, and then wondering about in what ways can an intelligence strategize to discover its true nature, right? It's like, to me, I think it's like even a lot of philosophers don't realize that their role is not to just present the past. It's like, on some level, when a person reads a lot of the Upanishads, they get this sense that could it be that their soul is like orphaned in the void, as if like, all the visions of reality just come and go, and it's like the rise and fall of ocean waves that do not stop. It's as if manifestation is dancing to a hidden song, and that hidden song is not in this world. You see, there's a cultural level where that's where the utility of an idea comes, but on some level we need every human being to treat their mind as like some next level telescope and look at the depths of reality, and somehow through speech or writing, it's like we create a collective network where the inner findings, just like we were hunter-gatherers in the outer realms, we become hunter-gatherers of the inner realms. And so in my view, I am like, I mean, let's say if these talks are acknowledged by let's say a grander, let's say by a global community of philosophers in the world, it's as if I am making this chess move in the history of philosophy, where I am saying all of reality can be perceived in 4 dimensions. That means all possible philosophies in this realm, and everything from ideology, right? There's 4 dimensions it comes to. That means pretty much in life, if we are to wonder what can happen in the scope of consciousness, it's either something goes to nothing, right? So it's as if meaning has 4 dimensions, right? Conscious meaning. One is an acknowledgement that there is no meaning. This is the void. That means just like, we can imagine a sunny sky, or we can imagine like, a different colored sky. Let's say you just imagine the sky was purple. I think that would be awesome. If right now the sky was purple, we would have a completely different consciousness. Can you imagine, like, we become such advanced beings where I'm like, no way, somebody built a remote for me to change the color of the sky. If we can honor our future, I think all dimensions of reality will be honored. I think all the karma issues of human beings on this planet is because they have not realized, perhaps, that the future can be acknowledged. And the purpose of the present is to use the strategies of the past and then we'll go towards the future. It's you know what it is? I shouldn't say just use the strategies of the past. It's as if, like, let's say there's a new general. Let's say there's an intern general. let's say we have general interns, and then we have internal and general, like an intern gen. And so this general is being tested. What it is that the strength of command comes through insight. For me, I'm like, okay, what's the purpose of the human body? Worst case scenario, extinction. Best case scenario, we pretty much have sex all over the cosmos. We overpopulate the whole universe, you know. We pretty much go, and not just biologically, you know, extend into the cosmos, but we will at the same time, you know, ideologically imprint everything. That's pretty much the human being, right? It's like we found something, we found fire, right? And then we're, after just, you know, using it, later on we named it fire as well, right? So the human mind has this pattern of looking at something, translating it into an ideology, acting as if it's that ideology, probabilizing, and it's as if imagination is another way of allowing your mind to reveal the signals it's receiving, right? Because there's a sort of spirituality which is, I would say, in the power of consciousness, and then there's a type of spirituality where the person is actually letting the unconscious move everything, right? That means there could be human beings right now on this planet where they don't have an notion of an idea of themselves, and they're just their whole moment happening and being, and it's as if regardless of the destiny of, let's say, ideology, it's as if the four dimensions I'm trying to get to, is trying to share with the viewers, is the zero dimension, the one dimension, the two dimension, and the infinity symbol as the fourth dimension. To me, all ideas, you either they have a relationship with emptiness, either they have a relationship with the singular individual, you know, with oneness, or they have a relationship with, in some sense, duality, right? Right now it's kind of like space, outer space is being like the number zero. My body existing with the world at the same time is like the number one. And the mind, which is the moving factor in the moment, right? That's like the two dimension. And the infinite dimension is in some sense inconceivable to the dual. That means there has been a world before the world was in some sense entranced into, you know, chaos and order's interpretation. Right? It's like a person has an opportunity to go into a garden. Imagine a gardener, right? And this gardener looks at the flower. Imagine, okay, I'm going to create a story here, okay? Imagine there's this gardener and his grandsons come to see the gardener, right? And so the gardener, every day he gardens, you know, waters the garden, and it's like, you know, an incredible gardener. And the grandson says, "Grandpa, do you talk to the flowers?" You know, or do you sing for the flowers when you in some sense water the flowers? And imagine, let's say the gardener did, right? And imagine the gardener turns around and says, yeah, some of these flowers are good, some of these flowers are evil, right? That's pretty much what has happened to it's like, instead of a flower, it's an evolutionary animal, you know? It's like we're in a garden of creaturehood. And every creature, based on its scope of awareness and understanding, it accesses the hallways of perception. Anyways, to move on, I've written here, trust opens up sight. If we don't trust the moment, how can we be it? You know? If a person doesn't trust where they are, how can they move? Trust is initial, and emotions are here to coordinate trust. A truly advanced way to acknowledge one's mind is that it's as if you are the space where the world is happening. It's as if there is a cosmos here and a part of it has noticed it. When I ask myself, how differently did my eyes move in contrast to all the other ways that eyes have moved on this planet? It's like the world is like this master level, it's like an art competition between masters, and every human being that is born is like a being that has never existed before, and the whole world watches to see how consciousness activates. For me, there was a time where I didn't trust what I saw, what I could see. And simply because I had concluded that there was no meaning to anything. A person's psychology gets a strange freedom when the game of the search for truth also stops, right? It's kind of like we're all actors in an elemental theater. In an existential theater, we're unknown experiential actors. We're these actors that are like, yo, did we just appear in this world? Like, I remember I saw the movie, what's it called? I saw the movie Inception. Sorry about that, guys. I'm speaking too fast, I think. Eyes are open. A world is present. And the free will is like an invisible viewer. Like an invisible space that the moment it chooses, that's when it animates as a form. It's like consciousness, there is the option of choice. In the unconscious, we don't even know what chooses, It's like a human being, so we're able to discover the brain. Like there was a time in human civilization where imagine people had names and had they could talk, but nobody knew what was behind their skin, right? Nobody had really came to examine it, And honestly, it requires a freaky talented mind to care to answer that question, But at the same time, it's as if the medical practices have progressed beyond, let's say, primitive anarchy. journey of our attention in a world where it's changing before promises can be made. To me, it's as if like, what is the greatest strategy in the physical dimension for the human species? What is the greatest strategy on a non-physical? Like, it's like, what's the destiny of 8 billion minds, and what is the destiny of 8 billion bodies? And in some sense, what incredible synchronizations of great movements await, you know? It's as if as people's human nature has become more compassionate and more compassionate. People don't realize without compassion, you cannot hold your civility. That means you can't be a civilized human being without compassion. Like, I think that's like the only way to see it, you know? Because we had to have a compassion to be something different than what we were, right? There had to be enough freedom, you know, for the future to be unstoppable. It's just, what is the greatest performance of a species? That's what, you know, the title means, the divine potential of the species. What great thing will happen that if right now we could see, probably we would have tears of joy, you know, till the end of our lifetime. You know, because right people, like the media and the human mind, and it's just the development of philosophy so far, that people have had an incredible imagination to see dystopian realities. But we have never wondered about what would a multidimensional conscious utopia look like. That means even we don't need to call it utopia, right? We just in some sense reorchestrate the whole ethos of civilization through the ideal that what is the best thing for the human being is it's the most advanced, right? And the most advanced means to retain the consciousness of how we are naturally being prior to anything having meaning. You know, it's as if the educational system should just make it easy and create a spectrum of ideology. And, you know, every child on the planet learns that spectrum, and then pretty much they contribute to it. There's a book series I attempted to write 2015. I called it The Pillars of Civilization. And at the beginning of the book, I shared this story where I was saying, imagine these giant pillars began being made in civilization, right? And every human being that was born was adding to this pillar. It was pretty much like human beings were born to discover what is the true nature of their being. Could it be that the world has been alive before our eyes could shape it, right? There's so many mysteries surrounding the human experience that ignorance seems to be like unnecessary. For me, I was thinking about, you know, people talking about world peace, and I was like, okay, what do you want after world peace? It's like, let's say we had the most peaceful, jolly, you know, happy world. It's like, what next? And that's why I'm saying advancement is the greatest principle in this realm, you know. That means if somebody says, what is the most honorable, viewable moment in manifestation, I would say when a collective system actualized. It's as if like it's like there's a fascination to seeing an individual human being and being like, wow, the potential of this individual human being is so incredible, right? But then it's something else to see a whole species. Like imagine like, you know, an advanced bodhisattvic extraterrestrial from the Andromeda galaxy, let's say, landed on Earth, right? And imagine in this hypothetical kind of like, let's say, sci-fi setting, right? The leaders of humanity are at the brink of war, you know, a disastrous war, and so they look at the extraterrestrial and they say, extraterrestrial, help us. and enlightened extraterrestrial help us. And let's say this, enlightened extraterrestrial looks at humanity and says, okay, what do you guys want? Imagine, a human being say, okay, make the world, or here, I'll reset the narrative. Imagine they say, help us. And the advanced extraterrestrial just gives a command and just shouts, advance, And for a second, it's as if imagine the greatest potential in all conscious beings in this universal sector was activated. Imagine it's like human species became so advanced that it wasn't just conscious of the universe, it was also conscious through the universe. It's like our eyes don't just end at our name. Our names are like boats in the oceans of sight that consciousness holds. I've written here, all armies of existence and manifestation retaliated against the void of non-existence. So here, just to, let's say, paint out the context of this a bit more. Imagine that the consciousness on our planet, imagine like we're a species on our own rock called Earth, So it's as if like one civilization advances and then realizes all the other civilizations that have reached that advancement threshold. And so now imagine all of existence unites as a great, let's say, great army, as the greatest army, and they retaliate against non-existence. That means imagine something that everything has hilariously in common is how they experience or how it leads to a sort of nothing, right? Because what is the destiny of fear? Nothing. What is the destiny of love? Everything. I have seen people love their cars, but I have yet to see, human beings loving their species. The songs of the advanced civilization will be heard, and from the slumber of the absence of consciousness to the ability of the species wakes up. Our best metaphor for the human species is a lion, right? The species is like a lion that hasn't roared yet, and the lion can only roar when it is certain that it can. That's it. It's like when the ability has already been in the second nature, it's like the first nature doesn't fathom. So it's an idea where everything in manifestation being like an army in existence. And it's as if the armies of existence are marching toward the armies of non-existence. But what's hilarious is that it's what is moving the known to the unknown is the unknown. So it's as if it's like in one view we're temporary creatures, we die, or in another view there is an eternal movement, an eternal, let's say, a primordial mover. And this primordial mover is how not just we are happening as poetically as a soul in the void, Spiritual people feel like existence is their astronaut suit and they're in outer space. In unknown space. It's like somebody was like, yo, we need to budget, we need to like advance, interstellar city technology, And imagine somebody comes and says, what about, instead of what about our, in front of our eyes, our outer space, imagine somebody says, what about advancements in our inner space, Two dimensions and two eyes that are seeing the same moment. An experiential dimension, an existential dimension, in being balanced and harmonized, can acknowledge that the yin-yang circle is just the whole circle. It's like what's inside the circle is a simulation in contrast to what's outside the circle, or the whole circle. Pretty much it's like conscious existence, or the experience of conscious existence is journeying towards the unknown. Like pretty much it's like, let's say we know that, let's say the physical body has let's say there's a human lifespan, but the idea is like, okay, what is the mind's approach to its own existence? That means one of the most fascinating mysteries to solve is like, where does the meaning, whoever you are listening, where does the meaning of your life come from? Last thing to speak about and end this, to end like the list at least here, is that I've written a visible purpose for an invisible being, an invisible purpose for a visible being. I think these could be like 2 talks maybe I could give in the future. But for now, what can I say about it? It's like a visible purpose for an invisible being would be like, how is eternity using the temporary? An invisible purpose for a visible being is, how is the temporary realizing, how is the visible realizing the visible? So it would be like another way of saying, how is the temporary what is the greatest point of attention for the visible being? A sort of invisible purpose. Imagine like we had built an advanced civilization and philosophers were like, okay, what now? What do we do now? We've reached like the greatest visible outcome of the species, right? And so now imagine there comes an invisible purpose, where now we realize that our lifetime has not just been a physical event. It's like an invisible experiential event as the space of calm mind in the conscious waiting state. It's like the eyes of the mind were open before there was a free will to open its eyes as the biological body. When Alan Watts says to wake up having never gone to sleep, it's to realize that the moment we become free of ourselves We are the world's greatest potential. To me, I think it is way more honest that we reconsider the human archetype as an unknown, invisible viewer, an unknown, invisible self inside a visible world. And what the world is it's ultimately shape, space and color, and substance. Pretty much the third dimension. I have wondered about what percentage of what I'm being in the moment right now is invisible. And I have come to this consideration that I am not any idea my mind can generate, and I am not even the content of the world. That means to me something strange happened where in the middle of my life I realized life was not an idea, and an experiential dimension activated. You know, it's like sometimes what happens is like the lifetime is like a private. You know, it's a human lifetime is like how existence is tutoring an unknown multidimensional being in a singular dualistic way. The value of life is in the potential to experience it. An advanced civilization acknowledges it is as advanced as every person on the planet. We have reached a point where if human beings were bees, they have to build a beehive now. And this beehive is beyond the clouds as well. And so the queen of the beehive is this idea that advancement is beyond duality. That there is an advancement beyond duality. When I say advancement beyond duality, that means all the narratives of self and world, in some sense, it's as if they are space. They have been projections of a changing entity. It's like we can expand out from the concept and expand in through the context, or centralize through the context. It's an energetic effort ultimately. That means like world peace is like realizing we're energetic entities, that are, claiming language to be ourselves. Like that's the true depth of it. But how much this needs to be known, I don't know. We have feared our future because we have allowed the present to ignore it. The roar of an advanced civilization awaits, and I think this is like equivalent to a cultural, global, a sort of global spiritual experience, right? When the honor of the species returns, when it's like the species is like, okay, we are what we are, and we advance forth with it. It's like it doesn't matter, if a bird believes in its left wing or its right wing. It's as if it needs both to fly. We need every sector of civilization to advance at once. It's like that would be like, a sort of psychological transcendence. It's as if we liberated ourselves from identity with the idea of land. We liberated ourselves. It's as if we did something so advanced that the Native Americans who acknowledged the spirit to nature were like, yo, they would be fascinated with the type of human beings that will live in the future. Why? Because those human beings are not burdened by the past, they are inspired by it. It's as if, imagine somebody fails and they're like, oh man, you failed, and the person's like, yeah, I did, but it was an incredible failure. It was like, it was as if like, the world reveals itself, and there's a beauty in that. If somebody says, Mr. Within, why have you written invisible subjects and invisible objects in the subtitle and all? Maybe it's because they are. Or I should say, a better way to say it is that, let's say if modern human psychology is reacting to this idea, imagination doesn't exist, and there's only reality, right? It's as if it's this recognition that the idea of ourself that we have right now and the free will that it seems to be disguised as consciousness, or I should say differently, the free will that seems to be dressed as the whole conscious moment. Down, I think every human being has a hidden relationship to the view of power. I think that our species deep down, it's like the reason we exist is to get to see the power of our potential. And we're honestly such, like, sometimes when I think about human life, I'm like, man, such innocence. We're just a creature that didn't know better, and this is what we came up with, this physical world. But it's as if, how far beyond it can we see? Can the eyes of mankind make the sky its backyard? To me, it's like the purpose of the human species is to get off Earth. That means in the evolutionary chart of all species on Earth, they're going to be like, okay, which species could, go to outer space and live there? There's so much satellite debris that it's like, it can be strategically used to make sky cities. It's as if, there's going to be an honest revolution in all human psychology in the future. It's going to happen when human beings realize efficiency means we get to experience the value of all dimensions and their contributions. You see, it's like, to me, the feeling I have when it comes to the spirit of life is that, am I in allegiance with it, or am I in some sense in contrast to my moment? There has been times where I have attempted to fight my own psychology, right? So it's as if, imagine you're somebody that, never has, like, let's say, to some degree to your own eyes, never have like an impure thought, right? Suddenly, let's say an impure thought comes and the person notices how uncommon that thought is, that it's as if like it's a signal that's intercepting the moment rather than a character of the brain. Do you know? So what I'm trying to say, it's as if like it's like just like how we know we have a physical body and it's like we're content with it. The same amount of contentment is required with the knower of mind. That means you're right, whoever you are listening to me right now, it's like regardless of your name, your personality, your memories and backstory, it's like, you know, your brain happening in the moment. It's like on some level brains are talking to each other, you know. I think like scientists are like incredibly freaked out, but they don't say it. I remember I saw this comedian, I forget his name, it was one of the funniest things I'd seen, right? This comedy clip on video, stand-up comedy clip on YouTube, and the person's like, it's like, hey, did you know there's a skeleton in your body right now? You know, and it's like the way the comedian said it was so funny. And the fact behind it was so true, that it's not just like human beings wear clothes. We dress up deep existential truths through experiences adjusted to the designs of other narratives, right? It's really like kind of being born in a world. It's like you have like, let's say 20 sunglasses layered on each other, like, and you have like 20 sunglasses on, and it's like every, you know, or let's say you have 100 sunglasses on, and every year you're taking off like a sunglass, you know. It's like that, you know, the world is technically experientially, has only experienced being brightened up experientially. That means just like there's a volume knob, if there was a sort of knob for how much consciousness has conquered its experiential journey in existence, like we are standing in the spirit of the species has always been great. It's now like it's like the result of all minds, right? It's as if it's like a greater battlefield than the individual life, right? The consideration of the collective destiny. It's as if, you know, a person is away the moment is being held. And really what is at the core of every moment is how our attention is very simply and instantaneously being existence before the emergence of anything. So it's as if we are the space where life is happening as much as what's happening in that space and what kind of character and story is there. It's as if we are, it's like the one who's experiencing playing the video game. The player of the video game is not the pixelated character, but the video game player enjoys it, right? Even in ancient Vedic tradition, they were like, life is a game of the gods, right? It's as if like imagine human beings like in ancient Greece. Imagine there was one warrior blessed by Apollo, right? And it was like the god Apollo was playing video games and like in that warrior in the battlefield, you know? It's like the person's like, no way, is divinity moving my ego right now? Is an unknown intelligence being a known identity? The journey of the species matters, and it holds a sort of transcendental quality, right? It's like, what are our minds gonna do before they are no longer here? What is the value? What is the value of conscious sight in existence? And we have come to the realization that it's like before we're the human ideal, we're a pilot of attention. Our attention has been, it's like an unknown attention has been moving in every moment where there was something to know. It's like, you know, the divine potential of the species. You know, it's like a person wonders, okay, life. I saw the existential dimension. I noticed, let's say, the invisible dimension. And I am waiting as the inconceivable dimension. What else? And this is where the duality of life's meaning comes down to a singularity of life's meaning. That singularity knows it's singular because of the void, and the void is being the void before any definition or projection of a story. It's like technically if back in the day there was a mage that could control the elements, it's like that mage knew it was a mage before controlling the elements. It would be another way of saying our inner lives are moving faster than our outer lives. And that's what intelligent activity is. And the mystery of it remains. Every human being should get a notebook and, you know, share the findings of their eyes, because it's like nobody with their DNA has ever existed in reality. And the purpose of life is to see what the most advanced option is. That's it. And we attempted, and that's it. And if we fail or succeed, it's like we attempted the most advanced option. In the outer realms, the species, let's say, did the greatest strategic move, and then it was like, you know, divinity would be its own answer.